today about the regulations affecting our research enterprise, but let me note that my written testimony also gives a number of examples of excessive regulation that increases unnecessary costs and interferes with how we serve students. No nation on earth has been as successful as the United States at building remarkable institutions that offer an outstanding education and conduct the kind of basic research that fuels innovation and helps solve immediate problems in the real world. That's why the rest of the nation wants to send us their best and brightest students. But international preeminence does not come with a lifetime forever guarantee. Excessive regulation of research universities can only erode their success over time. Thank you for your commitment to helping to bring this unwieldy system under control. And with your help, great research institutions like the University of Wisconsin, Missouri, Michigan, Montana will continue to keep this nation on the cutting edge of innovation. Thank you.
Thank you, Chancellor. And I really want to thank you for bringing this to my attention a couple of years ago when you came into my office. And, you know, the Small Business Administration has a study that puts the cost of complying with federal regulations at $2 trillion per year, which you divide that by the number of households is almost $15,000 per year per household. So, I mean, I appreciate the fact the university is grappling with this problem, that you're highlighting it. Our entire nation, our entire economy is as well. So, again, this is a really good testimony. Appreciate it. Our final witness is Mr. Keith Repko. Mr. Repko currently serves as Medical Center Director of Veterans Affairs for the St. Louis Healthcare System, where he oversees 3,000 employees. Prior to becoming Medical Center Director, Mr. Repko served as Deputy Director, where he led efforts to reduce veterans' access time to be in the top 25% of all VA facilities, as well as improving patient advocacy. Mr. Repko.
Good morning, Chairman Johnson, Ranking Member McCaskill, Senator Langford, and Senator Peters. Thank you for the opportunity to participate in this hearing and to discuss the design and construction projects at the Jefferson Barracks and John Cochran campuses of the VA St. Louis Healthcare System. The St. Louis Healthcare System is a dual-affiliated, full-service healthcare system providing inpatient and outpatient care in medicine, surgery, neurology, psychology, rehab, and many other subspecialties. It's a two-division facility that serves veterans in East Central Missouri and Southwest Illinois. The John Cochran Division, named after the late Missouri Congressman, is located in Midtown St. Louis and comprises the medical center's surgical capabilities, ambulatory care units, intensive care units, outpatient specialty care clinics, and our emergency department. One of the top priorities for the department has been improving access to care, and in St. Louis, we've taken that to heart. While more work remains to be done, both the VA and St. Louis has made real progress. In fiscal year 16, St. Louis has hired 385 staff, including 36 physicians, 4 physician assistants, 93 nurses, and 252 other critical occupations. We've extended clinic hours at 5 of our locations and hold Saturday clinics at 2 of them. Additionally, we have increased the delivery of care by using telephone consults and secure messaging to better use our providers' time, improve access, and meet veterans' care's needs where it's convenient for them. The Jefferson Barracks Division is a multi-building campus overlooking the Mississippi River in South St. Louis County. It provides psychiatric treatment, spinal cord injury treatment, geriatric care, rehab services, and has a domiciliary program for our homeless veterans. The VA is currently pursuing a major construction project on this campus that will enable us to better serve veterans' health care for decades to come. The project is a joint VHA and NCA venture and will construct a total of 5 new buildings. The project will relocate primary care, mental health, and specialty care clinics out of its current 1920s building into a modern environment and allow for expansion of care. We'll also construct a new patient aquatic and rehab facility, replacing an older facility that frequently we have to shut down in the heat of the summer due to lack of adequate air conditioning. Lastly, the project will replace an obsolete fire alarm system, construct a new support building, provide 800 net new parking spaces, and construct a facility to replace our obsolete engineering and consolidated warehouses. Upon completion, the project will decrease the amount of infrastructure maintained and operated by VHA through the demolition of energy inefficient and underutilized buildings. will also provide approximately 30 acres to the NCA for the expansion of the Jefferson Barracks National Cemetery. Without this land, the cemetery would be closed for burials in several years. The total project cost is $366 million, and it was approved as a VA major project in 2004, partially funded in 2007, designed in 2008, started construction in 2010, and is scheduled to be completed in 2020. Currently, the project is 52% complete and has no cost overruns. The John Cochran campus also has a major project that was funded for design in 2010. The project proposes to construct a new inpatient bed tower and allow for the expansion of specialty care clinics with an estimated cost of $433 million. In 2015, all of VA's major projects, including the John Cochran project, were reevaluated and rescored through the SCIP process to ensure the project's requirements are still valid and the project remained a high priority for the department. St. Louis's John Cochran project did not score high enough to be included in the 2015-2016 budget cycle, and therefore is currently not actively being developed by the department at this time. However, the project is eligible to be reconsidered in SCIP and will be reconsidered for funding in a future budget year. In closing, each day we move towards our goal of improving and streamlining our processes in order to provide the exceptional care that veterans earned and deserve. Mr. Chairman, this concludes my statement. Thank you for the opportunity to testify for the committee today, and I'm pleased to respond to any questions from you and members of the committee.
Thank you, Mr. Repko. I'll start the questioning with Mr. Darrow. You know, quite honestly, when you take a look at the number of recommendations that have not been addressed at all in government, it's actually surprisingly low. I mean, the fact that you have over 50% fully implemented, 30-some% partially implemented, and less than 20% not, is really testament to, I think, what you've been able to accomplish of getting your recommendations implemented. You said that Congress has actually passed laws, which have been the primary reason for doing that, and you've got 61 recommendations now. Can you give us some kind of sense how many different laws, and just kind of in general, it took to get that level of implementation, and what would you contemplate with your recommendations right now? I mean, would you maybe suggest this committee try and put those 61 recommendations into one piece of legislation, try and get that on the floor and get it passed, or was this more effectively done kind of individual bill by individual bill?
The approaches that have been taken in the past have mostly been bill by bill, and they've taken advantage, for example, in eliminating the direct payments, the farmers program, which duplicated other programs, was handled through the Farm Bill. Congress let the ethanol tax credit lapse, so they didn't actually do anything, and it went away. But I think any legislative vehicle that you can come up with would be an appropriate vehicle. Some of the ones that we have recommendations to the Congress for action yet haven't been addressed for a number of years. And, I'm concerned that they could get stuck in the normal legislative process, and so perhaps having a combined omnibus, if you will, or a package of these bills would help. So I think any legislative vehicle would be good.
I know in past Congresses, I know Senator Ayotte, Senator Tester, trying to propose legislation that would have forced agencies to do this. But I'd love to work with Senator McCaskill and work with the GAO, and let's craft something that will actually impose that requirement on the agencies to implement these things. So.
Yeah, I think the past efforts have been focused on, like all of our recommendations, they have to respond to. I think it would be better if you target the specific recommendations that you're comfortable with, and that we've included, particularly the ones in the list of 61 for Congress to take action on. And then there's other opportunities for the Congress to put some pressure on the administration to implement some of our other suggestions.
So we'll work, in bipartisan fashion with your staff, different senators, and we'll figure out what that list is, and we'll get a piece of legislation. I think Leader McConnell would be very open to. He was looking for a bipartisan piece of legislation to move across the goal line. So let's definitely do that. Mr. George, I remember, I think it was your 2012 report. You listed 10 addresses with, I believe it was the Earned Income Tax Credit, where there were multiple filings. And the top address, I think, are 24,000 filings with requesting and obtaining $46 million of refundable tax credits. Was that the Earned Income Tax Credit, or was that the child?
There's so many instances of people taking advantage of the tax system using that scheme, sir. So it may have been the Earned Income Tax Credit. It could also have been the first-time home buyers credit or the additional child tax credit.
My question was, I mean, to me, that was one address, 24,000 claims, $46 million. I know we're not making a whole lot of progress. Have we at least closed down that abuse after all these years, or does the IRS still failed on that part?
I have to give, again, as I noted in my testimony, the IRS some credit as it relates to the Earned Income Tax Credit. As Senator, you and I spoke out in the hall, and then as you discussed during your opening remarks and my comments, the amount of improper payments for the Earned Income Tax Credit was in excess of $20 billion a year a few years ago. And so, and even though it's now roughly 16, 17 billion, that's still moving in the right direction. It has, even though there was a slight uptake in the last fiscal.
But again, my question was, to me, it'd be pretty simple to take a look at an address and say, well, we're not going to allow, if there's more than 10, refundable tax credits claimed, we're going to take a look at that. It was absurd that 24,000 claims went through one address. I mean, have they fixed that problem at least?
They have not fixed it, no. They still have the problem, sir.
Yikes. But part of the problem with these is the individual taxpayer identification number, correct? Rather than the Social Security number?
That's correct.
That is just rife with abuse.
As it relates
Can you describe that?
Yes. The Congress passed legislation that now requires the use of a Social Security number or if you're a green card holder, the use of that number for the Earned Income Tax Credit. However, for the additional child tax credit, which again is a growing problem, while we at the IG's office believe that federal law does require that same restriction, the IRS has taken a different position on that issue. And while we again have debated this back and forth with the lawyers at the department, they won't budge.
Let's tack that on to our GAO piece of legislation here. Chancellor Blank, I do want to give you an opportunity because I thought your written testimony was pretty powerful about other overregulation. As I'm hearing your testimony too, what you're asking for is not no regulation, but some common regulations, some uniformity, so that you're not trying to comply with umpteen different reporting requirements that could all be grouped together and provide common forms. Is that? Can you just talk about some of the other parts of your written testimony?
Yeah, no, that's absolutely correct. Right now, we have different forms for conflict of interest, different forms for reporting, submitting, saving data, and it becomes incredibly complex when you're a university like Wisconsin, like other big research universities that are getting research funding from many, many federal agencies, and everyone has different requirements. In my written testimony, I talk not just about the research issues, but about the issues relating to students. And one of the regulatory issues there that I find most compelling relates to the Clery Act, which regulates how we deal with crime statistics on our campus. It's a very important act, very, very useful and valuable to us for tracking. But certain interpretations of what the Clery Act, that the department has put upon us include such things as any place where our students spend more than 2 nights, we have to collect local crime statistics and report them as if they were on our campus. So whether our students are, we had engineering students going off to an Elon Musk competition recently. Our athletic teams obviously often will spend multiple nights overseas. That takes an enormous amount of time and effort working with local police in those areas, and quite honestly results in a reporting of crime statistics that has nothing to do with our students and is simply a misperception about what type of crime is happening on campus. So, that type of interpretation of the law just makes life very, very difficult and increases our expenses in ways that are not helpful.
Okay, I'll come back to this. So, Senator McCaskill.
Thank you. Let me first do the VA. Mr. Dodaro, your 2017 report talks about the management of medical facility construction projects. And basically what I gather from the report is that you've got an agency within the VA that is supposed to be overseeing this at each local site, but there isn't appropriate coordination between the on-site personnel and this part of VA that's supposed to be managing all these construction projects. Is that a fair summary, or can you fill in?
There's really not good coordination. Now, VA, generally speaking, is a very decentralized organization with very little oversight and accountability from the central organizations of VA. And I could say that broadly speaking. That applies to health care, that applies to disability as well. You know, in this case, the change orders that were being approved weren't going through a regular, timely process, and design changes. And you can see these add to the cost of the projects, and so we asked them to put that under a better control process so that it could be approved in time, and so everybody knew what the consequence would be of the change orders and design processes there as well. I think the big change that really Congress required is for now going forward, any project over $100 million is to be run by someone outside VA. Most of the ones right now are run by the Army Corps of Engineers, so you actually have people that are, you know, experts in construction projects. The ones under $100 million are still being run by VA, and some of the ones that were over $100 million that weren't new, some of them were transferred, like the Denver project that ran into a lot of problem, and under VA. Now, the only responsibility, if the construction is done by the Corps of Engineers or another organization, is for VA to come up with costs of activating the facility, actually putting the medical equipment in there and preparing it for operations. And so that should help a lot by taking the big new construction projects out of the hands of VA and put them with the Corps, Army Corps, or another, you know, competent organization.
So going forward, the Army Corps will be doing the projects that are as large as Cochrane?
Anything over $100 million. It will either be the Corps or the legislation requires somebody other than VA. So far, they've gone with the Corps.
Yeah.
They could choose someone else, but the Corps is the only one so far.
I'm proud that we don't have cost overruns with the projects in St. Louis, Mr. Repko. I think that's terrific. I know we're a little bit behind schedule, but a lot of that has to do with how quickly VA has decided to request the money. I think one thing that Americans need to realize is that Congress has been very, very generous to VA since fiscal year 2008. We funded 177% of the request of VA. In fiscal year 09, we funded 183% of the request. Fiscal year 10, 106. Fiscal year 11, 100. Fiscal year 12 was the only time since fiscal year 08 that we funded less than 100% of the request that was made by VA. I don't think there's anybody else in government that has that kind of track record in terms of securing appropriations, particularly for capital. Even the military doesn't have that kind of success rate as it relates to capital. So I'm glad that we're not overrun. I do want to bring to your attention, I have recently learned that there have been some concerns regarding the quality of the ongoing construction at the facility at JB, at Jefferson Barracks. And we have been in contact with the VA IG about this, and we have been assured that they are looking into it. Are you aware of any of these concerns about integrity and quality of the construction that's ongoing there? I know it's not your direct responsibility, but are you aware of any problems? Have they been brought to your attention?
Just recently, actually, working with your staff and preparing for this, became aware of some. But I can tell you what, we've had a very good relationship from the facility. In fact, we have a team that works for the medical center, so works for my office, that interfaces, and that's our full job, is to interface with the construction folks in central office for VA. And our project is managed by the VA Office of Construction and Facility Management, because it was prior to the that other regulation. I can tell you, we have daily conversations, my staff do, with the CFM staff in managing the project. And myself and my associate director have weekly and monthly meetings with our staff. And at this point, we have no concern of any serious issues in this project, either moving forward, either in quality. I can tell you, I served as chief engineer for 12 years. And in that year, in those years, I managed a lot of projects and had staff that managed a lot of projects. I can tell you there's no such thing as a 100% perfect contractor or project. I would say contractors would say there's no such thing as a 100% perfect customer. But I can say in our project, CFM is working through any issues, and there's, like I said before, there's nothing significant either in quality that I'm aware of or any concern that would jeopardize this project.
Okay. Moving on to the tax credit, I tried to take a look at the education tax credit. One of the things that jumped out at me, Mr. George, was that of the 3.6 million returns with questionable educational credit claims, 49% of them, almost half of them, were prepared by a tax preparer. Well, don't we have something in place that if there are tax preparers that are doing this? I mean, is that why one address is responsible for all those? Because that's somebody who's put a shingle out in a community saying, let me prepare your tax returns?
There have been examples of that, Senator, but the IRS, in response to recommendations that we have made and concerns expressed by Congress, they have begun outreach to tax preparers who, in all candor, are at the front line in terms of helping to avoid tax fraud.
So you think 50% of these questionable education credit claims, these preparers just didn't know any better? Or were they trying to get over?
Yeah, well, I don't want to impugn everyone's reputation. There was no question that some of it's ignorance and some of it was malfeasance.
I'd be interested, if it's possible, to know if these tax preparers were individual proprietors or if they were some of the large chains that do tax preparation. Obviously, if this is something that's endemic, it seems to me that the basics of making sure that a refundable tax credit that your agency is preparing for a client would follow the rules as to the 1098 and as to how long they are in school and the appropriate institutions that qualify, which are the three big ones on that particular credit that always raise the flag.
We'll endeavor to give you that information, but if I may, Senator, I don't want to let the IRS completely off the hook here. The IRS has not used every avenue that it could to confirm that someone who applies for that credit is entitled to it. So, for example, the Department of Education has a list, databases, which the IRS, for free, or for a nominal fee at least, could have access to.
And they're not doing that?
They're not doing it.
Okay, that's ridiculous.
They're not doing it.
That's totally ridiculous.
And it applies to additional credits, too. I've said this many times before at other hearings, but whenever there is third-party reporting of income, it's almost a 99% compliance rate. But once the IRS fails to have access to that third-party reporting and relies solely on an individual, the compliance rate drops dramatically.
And finally, I know I'm out of time, but I really would like, and if you want to, I'll wait to the next round for you to answer it, but I think it's important when you report to this committee or any other committee that you at least give us a sense as whether or not the lack of staff, there have been dramatic staff cuts at IRS. No question we're leaving money on the table. I am not aware of any business that is in the kind of financial trouble we're in that decides it's a good idea to cut the receivables department. And for some reason, because of politics, we have decided around here that the way that we're going to make points with our constituents is cutting the IRS. Well, that is like cutting off our nose to spite our face, because these are the people we need to bring in the receivables. And it doesn't make sense to me, and I'd like for you at some point, I know I'm 2 minutes over and the chairman's been indulgent, we can wait to the next round to answer
Very
that.
indulgent.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'd point out we've given the IRS a lot more responsibility in these things as well. So it's a real problem. But also, I just want to be clear. The address used on a tax return is the taxpayer's address, not the preparer's address. So, again, 24,000 returns implies there's 24,000 people living at that address, which is, again, a pretty simple check with databases. Senator Langford.
It's a very crowded house is what that is. Thanks for being here, y'all. and for the work that you're doing, to be able to bring some of these issues to light. We appreciate that very much. We have talked